Good evening, everybody. It's 5 p.m. December 17th, 2018. This is Nacogdoches Planning and Zoning, and I'll call this meeting to order. The first item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes, or consider and take action for the minutes from November 12th, 2018 regular session. And I'll take a break here for a second. Again, the first item on the agenda is to consider and take action for the minutes from November 12th, 2018 regular session. All in favor, or is there a motion to approve?
I'll move to approve the minutes from November 12th.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carried. The next item on the agenda is a public hearing to consider a request for approval of a plat or replat from the Summer Hill subdivision, lots 3, 4, and 5, Block 2, generally located on Summer Hill Circle, Nacogdoches, Texas.
Good afternoon. So this is good to be back. So today, Leo decided to give me the hard one. Start off with this one, get that out of the way. So this should be a very simple case. We are going to be talking about Summer Hill Circle, lots 3, lots 4, lots 5 on Block 2. It's a subdivision replat. Very straightforward, okay? So if you look, this is the location. Some of the background. It's located in the northeastern part in the Summer Hill subdivision. I mean, I'm sure that y'all do know where this is. So it's up past Appleby Sand. As you can see, this subdivision is served by water utility lines, sewer lines, the basic utility, and I'm sure electrical easements and all that fun stuff. As it relates to this plat design, it currently is 3 different parcels, and the applicant is moving to be able to divide the middle parcel, which is unbuildable and non-conforming currently, to create 2 parcels. So the 2 owners, they bought this and they decided to share the parcel, cut in half, and that's why we're here today. So as you can see, there's an aerial map of it. If you look very closely, you can see that that middle parcel is a lot of forested land. It's very unbuildable as it relates to the zoning currently in this PD district. It is non-conforming. It does not meet the square footage needed to be able to build a lot. This is a notification map. We sent out 16 notices. We had around, I'd say 4 or 5 people either call or come to the office just to ask. There was no complaints, nobody against, nobody for. They just wanted to gather information, and we told them exactly what we're telling y'all, and nobody had any problems with it as far as we could tell. So this is what the plat will look like if it is approved. It'll just be 2 plats. The middle plat will be chopped right down the middle. Very simple. This is the development is single family. As you can see, the site is wooded. If you look through more of the site photos, it's Summer Hill. It's a subdivision. It's single family residences. To the north is a house. To the south is a street. To the east is another street, or another, no, that's not a street, that's a house. And then to the west is another street. This is not in the floodplain. There will be no flood damage. These are the key points to note. This is very, very straightforward, so trying to get confused with this. The middle property is unbuildable. It's non-conforming, so that's why we're here. We're here to have a replat of this plat to be able to bring it to conformance, and to it meets all the zoning and subdivision regulations that our current ordinance and requires. So I will give this challenging question to y'all to be able to solve, and I will step away.
Thank you. This is a public hearing. Anybody wishing to speak for or against this issue may come forward and state your case. If nobody wishes to speak, I would call for a motion to approve this plat.
Also moved to approve to accept the plat as provided in front of us.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
The motion carried. Thank you. The next item on the agenda is to conduct a public hearing considering a request for approval of replat for the North Highland Edition Section 2 subdivision lots 28, 29, 30, and 31A, generally located on 710 Bostwick Street, Nacogdoches, Texas.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman and everybody. So this is a replat. Planning department, just like the previous cases, I would say we are happy to see this kind of development coming through our office because it's an opportunity for developers and residents in the city to correct certain things that were done in the past. So, for example, in this case, we have 3 lots that does not meet the minimum lot requirements, and what the applicant is doing here is trying to put them together to meet current city regulations. As you can see on your map, it's 3 lots combined with different parcels, and the idea is to replat them into a single lot. I have on the map here showing the location map. That is the aerial view, as you can see on the screen. It's a single lot subdivision in a built-out residential neighborhood. The site is already developed with a single family home, and the applicant doesn't plan on doing anything else apart from keeping the single family home. As we drove along the street, we believe the applicant has done tremendous development to this property, and we really, it's pleasing to see people coming to the city to make such nice additions in the city limits. We did send out notifications to 10 property owners within the 200-foot notification, and there were 0 responses in opposition and 0 responses in approval of it. So if this replat is approved, this is how it's going to look. It's going to move from 3 single lots that did not meet the minimum lot requirement into a single lot which will meet our current R1 regulations. And once again, these kind of replats are basically to help clean some of the issues with lot not meeting the minimum lot requirements in the city. Staff believes this replat will not have any adverse impact on surrounding properties, and it will not change the zoning of that lot because it's a single-family residence, and it will remain as it is. I have a picture here showing the side view. I have a picture here showing Bostwick Street on the screen. So once again, it's a replat trying to bring these lots together and then trying to make sure it meets the minimum lot requirements. There are no issues with the submitted plat. Staff has adequately looked at it from planning and engineering, and the plat is a good initiative towards bringing non-conforming uses and lots to meet current development and zoning regulations. And based on our review, it meets all zoning and subdivision regulations as stipulated in the city's Code of Ordinance. That'll bring my presentation to an end, and I'll be willing to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Manti.
So this is actually just more of a housekeeping issue.
Housekeeping issue, and it's coming to P&Z because it's in an R1 zoning with single-family homes around it, and it's more of a courtesy to let residents and the public know that this is what is being done. That's why it comes to P&Z.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the replat as presented to the committee.
Well, we have to call it a public hearing.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Maney.
Okay.
It's a public hearing. Anybody wishing to speak for or against may come forward.
I'm Jeff Opperman, owner of Opperman Surveying Company. We did the subdivision for North Heights Edition Section 2. With me today is the owner, Jennifer Klingenberg. And if y'all have any questions, we'll certainly be happy to answer them.
I have no questions.
I am a little confused, and so you might have to explain it to me. So, you know, it was 3 properties, and so, oh, my name's Jennifer Klingenberg. So it's 3 lots. Our house is on 2, right? And so we want to separate the 3rd one for a separate thing. So I'm a little confused because there's 2 that my house sit on, and now there's going to be this separate one that we hope to build a house for my parents on. so it'd be like its own address.
That-
So will you kind of explain to me, like, because that's not gonna be just my house.
There's 3 lots that are being combined. They're split out into 2 lots. One will have the permanent residence on it, and one will be a vacant lot to the west, which is a buildable site.
That's lot 1. Yeah,
So that's okay?
yeah, it meets code evidently, so
Okay. Thank you very much.
thank you.
That's all? No more questions or anything like that?
Anybody have any questions? No, thank you.
All right, so just to clarify, this is a replat of 3 into 2 lots instead of 3 into 1 lot. Is that what
Yeah,
this is?
so 3 into 2 main and
Okay.
1 vacant.
Okay.
Yeah.
And the lot 1 conforms to all the city
Yes, it meets them
Okay.
requirements, yeah.
as far as setbacks and everything.
Yeah.
Well, Ken, would you like to?
Sure. I still would like to make a motion to approve this replat as presented.
I would still call for a second.
I'll second.
All in favor, raise your right hand. Motion carried. The next item on the agenda is a public hearing to consider the request for a specific use permit to allow for a communications tower to be constructed on lots 10A and 12 located at the intersection of Bowie Street and Pearl Street.
So this is for a specific use permit to allow a communication tower within the city limits based on submitted drawings. And I'm sure your P&Z packet this time around was quite heavy, basically because of I wanted to give you all the information, and most of this came from this communication tower. Mostly these come into cities with the idea to improve communication and reception. But in as much as we want to see better reception and communication, we also have to make sure it meets our minimum requirements and does not have any adverse impact on surrounding users. So right from the start, I want to say that this is a specific use permit. And so the P&Z has the mandate to put any conditions that you want to put on this development before you vote on it. If the applicant decides that your conditions are too much, then we'll have to come back again. But I just want to put that out there before we even go ahead with anything. I have on my screen the location map. The property is about 9 acres and is currently zoned agriculture. Therefore, if this SUP is approved, it will still be zoned ag, and the zoning will not change anytime soon. The applicant has had several interactions with planning and engineering staff. He submitted some plans earlier. We looked at it. We gave recommendations, and then they came back with a final site plan. So what you have with you that was sent in the packet is the final site plan meeting all the minimum requirements. The lot is undevelopable. It's undeveloped now, and it's abound vacant, undeveloped, and residential zones. I think I have a map here showing the aerial. And I have a map here showing the zoning to be ag. On the north and on the western part is also zoned ag with vacant lands, and I think there's a lot of development on the eastern side of it. Per the comprehensive plan, the future land use calls for this to remain as rural development, and the remaining is vacant. One of the reasons why staff considered this communication tower is we believe that once the monopole is put on tower, no other development will go around it. So the point of maintaining it as rural will be more achievable if there's a monopole tower on it, as against building other structures on it. In approving an SUP, we look at several factors. The first one I would like to point out is we look at compatibility. The area is close to West Austin Streets. It's near the undeveloped floodplain. We believe that this development is not going to increase density. It's not going to increase the number of houses. It's not going to put any structure. All it's going to have on site would be a monopole tower. There are a lot of, hearsay or points that come about with monopole towers, but in terms of compatibility, we believe that it's not going to increase any development in the area, and it will be compatible with the neighborhood. Because based on the site plan, I don't think there's going to be anything built around this monopole tower. It is going to remain as agricultural as it is. So compatibility-wise, we believe it's fine. We also look at orderly growth and development, and we believe it will not impede the normal and orderly development of surrounding properties. It's just going to be a monopole tower. It will not impact any other development that will come around that neighborhood. One of the factors we also consider is supporting facilities. The site is adequately served with all basic utilities. And the applicant did provide a lot of general notes to let us know how the development is going to be on site. And one of the key ones that we wanted to put out here is that the care will be taken to locate all existing underground obstructions, utilities, and easements before digging or drilling on site. And so staff believes that once this development begins, the applicant has stated that all utilities and care will be taken to make sure that their development, even during the construction stages, will not impact any surrounding utilities or any other development. We look at drives and parking based on, I have a picture here showing the site location. There's going to be a driveway. This development is just going to be a pole. I don't expect to see parking spaces on site, but the driveway should meet our minimum driveway requirement and should be able to accommodate any vehicle that will be on site to maintain this development. The monopole tower will not be lighted, but lighting will be provided for personnel use during maintenance. And per the site plan provided, clearing of trees and vegetation on the site shall be held to a minimum only. And this is something that was said as part of the application. Only the trees necessary for construction of the facility shall be removed. So based on the site plan provided, the applicant intends to clear only the trees that will be impacted by the location of the monopole tower. Every other tree or any other vegetation on site will remain as is. And this, as said, is part of the notes that were provided with the site plan. It's a specific use permit, and so this is also a condition why staff would recommend approval. So if the applicant comes in later and decides to clear the whole lot and do any other development on the site, it will contradict what was provided in the site plan. So we want the applicant to know that we have taken key notes of every single detail that was provided in the site plan, and we hope they conform to that as well. Per the 2003 comprehensive plan, for an ag area, we say sparsely populated areas with limited development that are distinct from more urbanized areas. This typically encompasses relatively large tracts of unsubdivided land used for agricultural, forestry, and resource extraction. So the 2003 comprehensive plan calls for ag areas to keep their natural environment, and we believe that this monopole tower will be able to conform to that. Apart from the monopole tower, we don't expect to see any other development on site. The site will remain as is, and will keep that agricultural feel that is within the neighborhood or on that property per se. Per the floodplain map, as shown on your screen, half of the property falls in the 100 or 500 foot floodplain area, and this was one of the conditions why staff feels an SUP for this development is ideal, because as you can see on the map, let's look at the location of the floodplain, and then let's look at the location of the pole. You realize that the development will not go any closer to the floodplain. So in our efforts to preserve or protect flood areas, such a development will be ideal, because apart from the monopole tower, every other portion of this lot will be maintained. And so it's a good way for the city to, not just the city, but for this lot to preserve the floodplain, the floodway, and make sure that nothing else happens to it. So we believe that a development of this nature is ideal for the land, especially considering the floodplain map. We did send notification to 13 owners. We received none in opposition or in favor of it. We did have some phone calls trying to find out what is going on, and we did explain that to them. I have a picture here showing the monopole tower. I believe it's 120 with a 10 feet lightning rod on top of it. So that makes it 130, which is standard for most monopole towers within the state and the country. I have a picture. Let me go back and show the site plan with the aerial showing the exact location. I don't know if you can really see it out here, but ideally this should be the outcome. Just a driveway showing the monopole tower on the eastern part of this property, and then the rest of the property should remain as is. And so, like I said earlier, the floodplain will be preserved. The agricultural nature of the land will also be preserved. We did take site photos. This is the site view, undeveloped. It's wooded, and we expect to keep it as is. We did take some pictures around on the north showing, I believe, Pearl Street, and on the south showing some residences down there. To the east is a residence, and then it's vacant on the west side as well. Key points to know: the proposed specific use is compatible with low-intensity residential uses, which the comprehensive plan calls for that area. And the specific use will help create orderly development. And of course, the P&Z has the option to put any conditions that you think would help mitigate any future problems that you perceive to occur with this development. And the structure is not and will not be near the 100 or 500 year floodplain, which to staff it's key, because it is one of our goals to preserve our natural vegetation and our natural creeks and lakes. And so this development, we believe, would help preserve that those creeks and floodplains. The development will meet all the subdivision regulation. If it's approved today, the applicant would have to resubmit the site plan. Staff will review it again and make sure that every single detail that we need to make sure this runs effectively will be adhered to. So in general, staff believe this development, it's a good addition to the city. It will help preserve the site in question. It will preserve the agricultural nature. It will help enhance communication within the city. And the applicant is also willing to go through all the subdivision regulation to make sure that what the development on site does not have any adverse impact on surrounding users. So we recommend approval of this development. And I believe the packet had so much information out there for staff to, for the P&Z to review. This will be my presentation to an end, and I'll be willing to answer any questions you may have.
So to summarize, it's going to be maintained as a 9-acre property. It's not going to be subdivided.
It's
further.
not going to be subdivided, and if you look at your packets, I intentionally added the notes to it. So based on that, it's going to be a 9-acre. They're just going to put a monopole on sites. The applicant hasn't told us of subdividing to build anything else on it, and we expect it to be that way. Anything contrary to that will be a violation of the SUP.
Okay.
So.
Thank you. Any other questions for Mr. Manthey?
So there won't be any adverse things, noise or anything for the neighbors, or that's what I was concerned about, anything, like you say, lights and noise and that sort of thing. Is there anything that you're aware of?
To be honest, with the construction stages, I think this is something that we cannot forgo.
Sure.
With my experience, I've had a chance to work in let me say Wichita Falls, which had an Air Force base, and so we had a lot of monopoles, and we had to deal with the military before these poles were put up. And even the military, with all the planes coming in, felt that monopoles do not really have any impact on the community.
Okay.
There have been concerns about monopole towers having some health and all of those issues. I have not done my research to disprove that, so I wouldn't disprove it. But I believe the applicant would have much information on that to put it out. But I do believe the construction stages would have those impacts. So.
Sure.
There are two other towers like this on maybe adjacent to North Street. There's one not too far from this one, I think, where it becomes East Austin, just on kind of like over by Austin Bank. And then there's one down here.
Butcher Boys.
Yeah. And both of those are at a higher elevation, I guess. This is gotta be, what, 30 or 40 feet lower than
Lower than
North
that.
Street? Would you say, so does
Yeah,
that
it's-
make the
it's-
tower proportionally taller, or is that a question we'd have to ask the
I think-
engineers?
I think I believe the applicant is in the audience, and so yeah. But I think on the average, most towers I've seen it's 100 feet. So this being 120, I believe it also has to do with how low that portion of the land is. So yeah, but it's a question that I would throw to the applicant if he's here. I don't want to.
And this is pretty, would it be pretty visible from West Austin coming in from the loop? If you're coming in toward,
I should think 120
Yeah.
probably it should be, because it's high, and around that vicinity there's no development that high, so it should be pretty visible from there.
okay.
Thank you. If the applicant could come forward.
Hello.
How you
Hi,
doing?
Name is Cody Cogdill, CMI Acquisitions, here to represent Verizon Wireless. Thank you.
So you've got a generator called out in the plans, I guess, that's just gonna run in power outages?
Yes, sir.
Emergency situations?
That is it. Yes, sir.
Does it produce any other noise that people would find
Nothing on the
offensive?
site produces any noise that you're going to be able to notice at all.
Right.
You could stand right next to the fence next to the site. You're not going to hear anything at all.
The, one of my concerns is, since this is on a entry into town and it is kind of a, very visible, location, is that we're gonna have this kind of stark, just very utilitarian, one-pole tower, kind of breaking up what is right now just agricultural land. Is there any way you can dress up a tower like that to make it more aesthetically pleasing?
Not really.
'Cause
We can make
yeah.
it look like a tree.
Yeah?
Then it stands out more.
Okay,
I mean, because now you're looking at a 120-foot tree amongst others that are,
yeah,
40 foot. So then it even gleams bigger whenever you do something like that.
yeah, because I have seen some pictures of things like that, and.
Yeah, amongst
thought-
other ones, like
Yeah.
we're doing one in the Woodlands north of Houston, and they have some large pines there. So we've got one that is being done. Actually, AT&T is doing it. It's amongst those, and it blends quite nicely. It's a little taller, but it'll blend. But when you're looking at existing 30 and 40 foot trees, if that, because they're really pretty small. If you'll in the pictures, the ones because there's no large trees in that front area, maybe 30 to 40 foot tall. 120 foot tree, like monopine, I guess is what it's commonly called, would even be a bigger eyesore.
So there's no way for you to use another tower that's already,
I believe one of them that was mentioned was Austin there, and I think he was talking about it being behind the bank. That one's, I believe, at a storage facility. It is already well over capacity. If you'll ever notice, most monopoles are just pretty slick and slender. If you get a close-up look at that one, it has had large amounts of rebar added to the exterior of it for structural strengthening, because it's a really, really skinny pole, and so it's got 2 carriers on it, which means they had to beef it up to even get it to pass a structural analysis. So that one is not even viable at all. The other thing is if we start venturing outside of the area of optimal coverage that they would like to do, then we start having problems with phones not wanting to transfer between cell towers. So if we were to move too far from our search area, it wouldn't work. One of the original locations we wanted, we couldn't come to a deal with that owner, which would have been placing it close to the water tank there next to Austin, I believe. It would have been pretty close to that, much higher elevation, but we just couldn't come to an agreement on the deal. So one of the other candidates was potentially another property, but at the end of the day, this one Verizon felt was the best to fit the needs for the coverage for that area.
So did you have to make it taller because of the topographic change? I mean, if you had,
I don't think we did. I believe it still gave the coverage that they wanted because of we shifting it a little bit. It made it where it didn't cross over into other cell towers in that area, the signal. So I believe from day one, we've always looked at it being about 120 feet.
So who's gonna maintain it once it's in operation?
Verizon Wireless.
Yeah.
They'll be owned by them. The land we don't own, we're just leasing it. So as other comments y'all were discussing about future plans for that property, we don't have anything to do with that. We are strictly leasing, I believe our overall lease is either a 50 by 50 or a 40 by 40, and that is it. So we have no control over what that property owner wants to do with the rest of his property in the future. Only our lease area.
Leo, what's to keep a dozen other companies from wanting to come in and put in a tower?
Say that again, please.
What's to keep a dozen other companies from wanting to come in and put in a tower? And then we have the, multiple towers down North Street.
Well, we always give them the option to co-locate, and then once they create a hardship like we did with him, the one on Austin, he told us it's way over capacity, but that's what the first thing that engineering would always talk to them about. But it's a good point to note, but we always give them the option to co-locate on other poles, and if they give us a hardship that it's not possible, that is the only way we give them the go ahead to present a new one. But it is something that we can look at to see if we want to go ahead and look at an ordinance restricting the number of towers in the certain areas and stuff. Yeah, nothing stops us from doing that. So if PNZ wants me to start looking at it, I can. And can you talk about the 4 characteristics in case of any, just for safety?
I mean, it's further away from any residence, so in a catastrophic situation, if it was to fall, it's not gonna hit any habitable buildings. Even during Katrina, coming through there was, a Category 5 hurricane coming to shore. Most of the towers that even got angular hits were twisted, and it really didn't take down any. These towers are engineered to withstand hurricanes and tornadoes and just about anything, unless one just sits there on top of it. It's another story, but anything can happen. But these are engineered to take up to, I believe in the engineering documentation is also provided for the tower drawings, up to 130 mile an hour gusts. So,
Thank you.
yeah, no problem, sir.
Anybody else have any questions for the applicant? Thank you. This is a public hearing, so anybody wishing to speak for or against may come forward. And if nobody wants to speak, I'd like to discuss some specific use concessions. It's right on Bonita Creek, so I would ask that there's a streamside management zone as per the Texas Forest Service best management practices put into place there.
Basically, saying there should be no development around the floodplain.
Well, that would probably be better. I mean, if you wanted to maintain an SMZ inside the 100-year floodplain, that would be, I think it would help mitigate flooding in town, and it would sort of protect that area. And as SMZ, as defined by the Texas Forest Service, I think is 50 feet on either side of the stream, not to be less than about 50 square feet basal area. So it needs to stay wooded, and you can manage the timber in there, but you don't ever clear cut it.
So basically to protect the stream and all of those stuff.
Yeah, it helps protect the water quality and
Water
then
quality,
the
okay.
erodibility of the soil.
Okay.
So if we wanted to extend that to the 100-year floodplain, that would be even better.
Okay.
I also have a question, because I think Bonita Creek Trail stops very close to this property. In fact, I think it stops right at the apartments next door.
The one where they have to go around.
I think so. Is that correct?
I actually didn't look at the creek.
Yeah.
I was more into looking at. I think
Yeah.
so far as
I
on
know
the
we're getting
floodplain-
probably a far field. but-
Yeah, so far as you're on the floodplain, I have a feeling. Yeah, you.
Well, then, I mean, we can make it conditional. If Bonita Creek Trail doesn't have access to this property, I think it'd be nice to extend access along that streamside management zone
Extend access
from the property on the south to the property on the north.
Yeah, the two adjacent properties.
Hmm.
Just be able to continue Bonita Creek Trail along Bonita
Okay.
Creek through the property.
And that would be at no cost to the owner, I believe. That would just be
Yeah,
the,
there's a trails organization
Yeah.
that'll handle that. It'd just be allowing the public access to it.
yeah.
Okay, so I would like to call Cody. So when planning is addressing this development, we are not looking at just that portion where you want to put the pole. We are looking at the whole property in question. So as these conditions that are being put out there is something that it's basically protecting the floodplain and then extending, Bonita Creek Trail.
I don't, yeah.
And I know you don't plan on doing anything.
Well, I have no
Sure.
skin in that game. I mean, I don't own the property, and Verizon doesn't own the property.
Sure.
This is the underlying owner that's gonna have, to make this call. I can't make that call. I know that from time to time, there's cattle that graze on that property, so I don't think he's gonna have, I don't think he's gonna want any access going across the back of his property. And then I wouldn't blame him. And as far as the stream erosion, I'm not, can I get a little more education on that? I'm a little ignorant to
Well-
what specifically would need to be done.
Well, and like I said, an SMZ, best management practices defines an SMZ as a 50-foot wide buffer on either side of the stream where you leave it wooded. You can manage the timber in there, but you really don't ever clear cut it. You can take out half of the timber and still be compliant. And you let it grow and you can take half out again. So you can still manage it.
So you are basically not doing anything on the
but-
site. And now what is going to happen is if PNZ put the conditions on it, before it goes to the city council, I would add those conditions to it. So if you are not in agreement, then I would,
Well, the last one, I don't think so. I'm almost positive the owner's not gonna be open to that. I mean, unless y'all are gonna build fences along either side of it, still be able to give, cattle access to both sides of it, crossing or something like that. I mean, it's grazing property he utilizes. And also, I think he cuts hay off of it too, so. But I don't think he's gonna want just.
I haven't seen a
people's-
cow out there in years.
I
That's
just,
just me.
it might have been years,
Yeah.
I'm not sure. I know he says he's used it for cattle and grazing.
I think
so.
there have been in the past, but
Yeah.
yeah.
So I'm not sure how he's gonna feel about that at all. I'd almost be ventured from our relationship that we built, he's not gonna be open to that one. Now, the first one, I think
Yeah.
he would probably be open to that, it's probably not a big deal. I don't think there's any plans to build in a floodplain anyway. You're looking, because as you're looking at it, that's the 100-year floodplain back there next to that. I can't imagine any development or any growth or anything that he would wanna do back there.
so,
If we could remove this bottom one for that, I think that top one, the management,
Well, we should give him the opportunity to decide, I think.
Yeah,
I mean, unless you got his
'Cause
power of attorney on
It's
this.
still got to go up to the city council, so
Yeah.
he's got a chance to rebut it, and they can edit what we do
Yeah.
also. So,
Yeah.
I mean,
so that's what I was saying.
Yeah.
The PNZ has the option to put all their conditions on it, and I would relay that to you before it gets to city council. But I'll let city council know this is what the planning and zoning commission wants, and then at that moment, if the owner doesn't want that, then city council will decide if they would allow the owner to have his way or we go with strictly with what PNZ want. But Commissioner Depeche did state that I would have to verify to make sure the creek actually extends to that property. So if it doesn't extend to that property, then this condition will probably go away. So
which one are you talking
the
about?
second one.
The second one, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, 'cause I was wondering where that, and how.
And I
what would
haven't
be the
checked myself.
plan
Yeah,
on
sure.
how this trail, I assume it's some type of,
the goal is we want to have a contiguous trail system that encircles the city, and then we want to be able to have connectivity between our trails and our sidewalks, for people to walk on. It's just a longer term connectivity plan for the
Yeah.
city. So.
yeah, I've seen a lot of those, especially along abandoned railroads and such like that. A lot of
Yeah.
communities have, reused that, and yeah, they're really great.
So-
I can definitely, pose it to him, and then on the other hand of it, he might be open to selling that in the back of it to the city for them to do that, so.
Well, you can't use it anyway, you could just dedicate it.
I don't know if we can do that.
But I also want us to look at it this way. If we request for an access to the property, are we not doing more of a taking? Because it's like telling somebody with a private property that I want to put a trail through your property. It's and I'm looking at it from my planning perspective. If we, Commissioner Dapish, if we do that, it's like we are taking something away from the property owner. We are telling him, put a trail in there, whether he likes it or not. So
Yeah, well, we're saying if you want to put a 120-foot tower that'll be there for the next 100 years, then we'd like to be able to have a trail through your property, right? I mean, he's getting it, and we're basically saying you can make this money off, you can use your property for this use, and in return, you're going to let us walk across your property. That seems like a pretty fair trade to me.
is this something you
See,
would?
but I don't mean to interrupt, but you're wanting a trade. See, and I go through this often with cities. I'm dealing with one with the city of McKinney. City of McKinney wants a property owner before a tower can be built. They want a 40-foot additional right-of-way on the back of their property. Then they want in the front, right along a major highway, which is very valuable property. They want another 50-foot given to them before they'll let a cell tower go up. Personally, I think it's like holding a property owner hostage. If you want to make money, you got to give the city something first. That's just my personal opinion about it.
Well,
I get and understand.
Yeah.
Management, soil management, wanting to maintain trees and erosion, floodplain, stuff like that. But to give the city something before you give somebody something, I personally don't think it's right. I think you're, wanting to get something just because somebody else is wanting to make a buck.
Cody, the reason for specific use permit is to allow you to do what you want to do, but at the same time, the P&Z also has to take conditions that will protect the neighborhood, will protect the natural environment for now and the future. So if they make conditions, it's not like the city wants something from you.
But
because without a walking trail, the city is still functioning. But they are just thinking about the future, that if there's the need for us to extend our walking trail and it has to go to your property. So it's not like we really want to take something from you, because without a walking trail, the city is still functioning as it is. It's more of giving you the chance to also know that even though you want to put this development, there's the need for us to negotiate and make sure we are making each other happy. So it's not more of the city is trying to extract something from
No,
you
but
in that
it is.
regards.
But it is. I understand the top request. Completely in agreement with it.
Great.
I get it. But to have to give the city a right,
That I agree.
and that's what number 2 would be.
So it could be a
Having to
taken.
give you something before we get something. I don't think that's right. I don't think you should be able to hold a business or an individual before you get something. I just don't think it's right. I mean, I don't agree with
Well,
you.
there's no difference between that and a streamside management zone. It's saying you can't use property within a certain area of the creek.
No,
A
but
trail is less invasive than that.
that makes sense. But now you're wanting to give people access to this property, to just walk across this property, just willy-nilly right across this property.
Oh, but
But I understand to
I didn't use the words
maintain-
willy-nilly.
I know. Sorry. But I understand the aesthetics, I
Yeah.
understand floodplain management, because maintaining trees along that area, it's gonna help, reduce erosion, and I understand those things. Floodplain management, managing the trees along those areas are crucial these days, especially with all the flooding we went through with Houston, through down here and everything. I understand that completely. I understand maintaining that type of situations. But then, just like wanting to grant you an easement, because that's what that would be. It would be an easement across his property.
What is going to happen is we are going to look at our trail in the first place to make sure it even connects, and then we are going to further discuss with our city attorney, because I even mentioned that it could be a taking. So we'll discuss that further, and then if there's a need for us to move forward with it, we'll let you know.
Yeah.
Yeah. So don't take it like it's a give and take issue. It's more of the PNZ concerned about its citizens and not the property in question.
So far, I'm the only
yeah.
one who said anything
Yeah.
about it.
So,
I
Commissioner
disagree.
Depich, I will pass that through our city attorney
We,
and make sure we're on the right path before I relay to him, because
Yeah.
I was personally saying it's like
yeah.
telling him how to use his property.
Sure.
So, yeah.
Well, I would recommend we vote on it if it's legal,
Sure, and then, yeah, it'll go to
pending it, that it is legal.
legal, yeah.
And I would also say pending that Bonita Creek Trail does connect.
Yeah,
Well, even if it
exactly.
doesn't connect, I think it would be, you know, what's the problem with reserving that access for the future when it does connect?
Sure,
You know, that would be my point, but,
okay. Yeah.
What's the width?
oh,
15 feet,
Yeah.
maybe the max. I mean, it's a foot trail, you know,
Mm-hmm.
for, yeah.
Any other conditions? Driveway,
It seems well engineered.
okay,
I mean, that
I'm sure
seems
they've built
fine.
thousands of these sites, and so, yeah, I mean,
okay.
Is there a motion?
Also move.
Would you like to move that we approve it with the conditions?
We approve it with the conditions.
With further
Set.
research, okay.
With
that's
further
set
reason.
For that's, according to the stipulation.
Okay.
Matt is gonna check out and see whether the trail is going through or not, cause we assuming that the trail is going, and it's not. Until he check the condition, I approve it that it meet the requirements of the city.
Okay.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
All right. All in favor? Say aye. Aye. Motion carried. Last item on the agenda is conduct a public hearing and consider the request for a specific use permit to allow for a stone, sand, and gravel excavation on a portion of the property approximately 7.1 acres described as lots 1A and 4A, City Block 65, property ID 26248, generally located at 2722 Durst Street.
Okay, I believe we saw this last month. It came in as a rezone, and the reason why it came in as a rezone is because the applicant made, based on the definition of the work scope by the applicant, it was more of a rezone than a specific use permit. So on record, the applicant has, we did sit down with the applicant and has informed staff he wants to do this business, but in terms of moving the sand and stone on site is going to be done by just the applicant or just the operation owner. So basically what I'm saying is if somebody wants some stones, they're going to use their own vehicle or their own cars to move them on site to whoever wants it, as opposed to about 100 trucks coming on site to buy it on site. So now it qualifies for a specific use permit, meaning it's going to maintain the zoning on site. Like we know earlier, it's a 7.1 acre property. It has a residential building on site, but if this is approved, the applicant will cut that portion out and will let it remain as residence. The zoning designation is agriculture. Based on the SUP application, it is still going to remain as ag. For the 2003 comprehensive plan, the future land use for this area, as we can see on the map, is vacant. It doesn't really specify what should go on there, and the reason being that there are certain developments in the city that would come about as a result of future growth. I want to go over the factors that once again we need to look at in considering an SUP for a specific for an area. The area is in close proximity to loop, the loop, and has mixed uses. Staff believes the area has a lot of residential uses, and therefore increasing the presence of a stone and sand quarrying along this residential neighborhood might not be ideal, especially considering the fact that there's an existing use of that nature to the west of the property. So in terms of compatibility, we believe that because of an existing one, there's some sort of concern as to increasing that use on site. Orderly growth and development, the applicant will meet all subdivision regulation, and we believe that he would also go through the site planning process. So in terms of orderly growth and development, we think it's fine. But once again, putting a stone and sand quarrying development along with some residences is where we have an issue with. Supporting facilities, the site is adequately served with all basic utilities. All developments such as driveway, parking, etc. would have to conform to current development standards. I don't think the applicant plans to put on a lot of parking on sites, maybe just a few for business, for personnel on site. We also want to look at the nuisance. Staff believes that before approving this development, the issue of dust, the issue of fumes and noise pollution should be considered as issues of concern. The development does not propose any lightening, and it does not propose any landscaping. Once again, staff believes this does not really comply with our comprehensive plan, which promotes a healthy living environment, especially within areas with close proximity to residents. With this send out notification to 8 property owners, we received 0 in opposition and 0 in favor. I would like to point out some few staff findings. It is important to note that there's an existing use of the same nature to the west of this property. This SUP, if approved, would likely increase the adverse impact on residential uses along the street. Some other enclosed industrial or commercial land use with less impact would have been a better fit. Staff believes the stone, sand, and gravel extraction would have detrimental impact on the neighborhood because of the existing one on site. I did provide the commission with what we call the dust map, showing how the impact of dust can, the extent of which it can go into the neighborhood. And the applicant has submitted some documents to give more information on the project. I have a picture here showing the side view, side photos to the north, to the south. It's an emergency ambulance service. To the east is residence. To the west is that existing use that I was talking about earlier. We did a view of their streets with residences, view of their street with residences as well. So the key notes to know is that the proposed development has submitted plans to reduce the property elevation down to 412 to 415. I think it's currently around 430 feet. And if the applicant is here to correct me if I'm wrong on this. The adjacent property has the same use, and staff believes another of such use will be detrimental to the neighborhood. The entirety of their street is majorly inhabited by residential users as you drive from the city. Staff believes the industrial use will increase the negative environmental impact on the neighborhood to include increased air and sound pollution. The applicant did a very good job of providing the commission with background of the projects and how he believes this project fits well into the city. I do commend him on that. I did read it, and I think based on what he has provided, it looks like a lot of things will be put in place to make sure this development does not have any adverse impacts on surrounding users. But with my experience in planning, I still believe that having this development, especially with the fact that there's one already existing in the same neighborhood or just adjacent next door, will increase the impact of this development on the residential users. So at this moment, I will leave it to PNZ to consider all the facts that I have given out and what the applicant also included. I think it's well written. He talked about the area and how this development fits well into the SUP. And so I didn't want to make this a one-way decision, so I added all to the development. And I think I'll rest my presentation here. And once again, this is an SUP. You have the option to put conditions on it to suit. The conditions are basically to help protect citizens and the environment as a whole. I'll bring my presentation to an end and will be willing to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Manning. Anybody have any questions for Mr. Manti?
Not at this point.
Perhaps the applicant would like to come forward and.
Good evening. My name is Miles Bradshaw, as the applicant for this specific use permit. And I've presented to each of you, I asked Jerry to put it in front of you, some proposed motion language that I think covers any conditions or stipulations that would be appropriate, in my opinion. And Leo, that's what they have right there in front of them. And just a couple things I would point out that, and this was my fault in the second application or second site plan that I gave to you, it still showed that front residential 1 acre would be cut out and subdivided, because that's what we were going to have to do if it was going to be rezoned. But since we're going specific use permit, there's no need to actually cut out that tract, and so it will all remain agricultural zoning. The whole property will remain the same. Now, what that does do, though, is create a second situation or condition that is part of the motion, proposed motion, in terms of a temporary driveway. Because as it is, there's a driveway to the residence, and it's an asphalt driveway that's really very customized for that house. And so we would ask that if the specific use permit is granted, that we also be allowed to put in a temporary rock driveway as we originally proposed and as is stated in the application, kind of on the west side next to Cobb's property, so as to access the backside and do the excavation. And of course, we would abandon that driveway if that's the proper way to say that with the city, once it's no longer being excavated in the back. Oh, and one other thing, I did include a topography map, which you guys asked for, and it pretty well came out as expected. You know, it's not perfect, but you can look at the map and see the elevations, but it's on average about a 10-foot drop toward what is Miss Hensley's property next door. And I have since spoken to her. She's here, of course. Miss Settle, the owner, is here, and Toady Duckett, our dirt guy, is here as well. They can answer any questions. But you know, one thing we're certainly willing to do to keep Miss Hensley happy with the boundary line is we're more than happy to do a 20-foot setback where we will not, you know, we will dig only up to 20 foot on our side of the property. And she seemed pretty happy with that. And she's here tonight. She could speak to that. So I'm here for any questions.
What do you expect the vertical cliff face to be when you're finished with operations, when you reach that 20-foot setback?
Probably 10 to 12 feet on average. That's my calculation. Okay. And that's if we dig down about 15 feet or so.
Okay, thank you.
And so you would be willing to leave you said like a 20-foot setback along that whole property line, along the eastern boundary?
Yep.
Okay.
And it's my understanding that for these special use permits, if the use ceases, and maybe Mr. Manti could speak to this better, for 180 days, then the special use permit basically is gone. Isn't that correct?
Yeah, that is if they don't start doing something on site.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, so they could keep it going, but as soon as they stop and there's a cessation of the activity.
If they don't do, let's say we approve it, city council approves it today, and then from 180 days they don't do anything on sites, then the use will, that specific use permits will be gone.
Okay. Is there a requirement to come back and have a reapproval
Yeah,
Yeah.
they certainly can come back to, that is if they don't do anything, they can come back and request for
Well, we
it.
could condition it and say, every year or 2 years, we want to get an update on possibly what the status of the removal of the dirt. if possible.
Great. So with my experience in my previous city, PNZ and City Council had a condition where the applicant would have to reapply every year till they feel that they are satisfied enough to tell the applicant not to come again. So yes, you can put that condition that they will come back every year. I mean, the next year that is how we should put it. The next year to verify if everything is going on well, and if it's okay, you can then make it a lifetime SUP. So
Okay.
yeah. So if it's something you want me to put down, I can certainly.
So you expected the lifespan of this to be 10 to 15 years?
I really think 5 to 10.
5 to 10?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I'd like to say, I think that this, thank you for reapplying as a specific use permit, first of all. I think this allows us to put some reasonable conditions that we were concerned about last time
Yeah.
on the use, while allowing you to use the property as you would like. I still think, based on what I said last time, that, with the use of the property, the Cobb property to the west, I think that this property would have to get excavated to some extent to make use of that area in the future. So I remain, if we can condition it correctly, I think it's
Yeah,
a
I
good
mean,
use.
I think the site next door needs to get remediated.
Yeah,
So I think
it
this could
does.
address that. So, before we start talking about that, would anybody like to speak for or against? Yes, ma'am.
I'm Katie Hensley, and I own the land just east of his property. And we have walked the property, and he explained to me, I believe, was it the TQEC? Is that the? Yeah. Explained to him how the angle, he would have to angle it and the runoff and everything. So I believe it's going to be adequate. We looked at the topographical map and everything. So I think it's going to be okay. And then he's going to put the silk fence on around the property line, and then he'll do the 20 feet over. And he can cut the brush and undergrowth, but leave the major trees, which will help with the dust and the noise, and all the noise from the loop also. So
Yes.
I think he'll be fine that way.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you, ma'am. Anybody else wishing to speak? Okay. Well, we know the property next door has got a big cliff face, which was sort of my concern about it. And I would maybe ask that we make a stipulation that there's no vertical cliff faces greater than 12 feet left at the conclusion of your mining operation. And if they are, you could mitigate them with a dirt slope no greater than 60 degrees. Just piled up against it, I mean, just to mitigate any kind of a collapse of the earth or.
And I'm certainly amenable to that. Only question would be, and let's look into the future for a minute and assume it's all shaved off except for the 20-foot on the east boundary line. Can we use some of that 20-foot to?
I think if you
You see what
left
I'm
a slope, like no more than 100% slope, which is a 45 degree, I think I would be okay with it with a 10-foot setback.
Yeah,
And then,
that makes sense.
Once the mining's done, yeah.
yeah,
at the end, yeah.
either you leave an earth dam at no more than 100% slope with a 10-foot setback, or you build a engineered retaining wall.
Yeah, and that's at the cessation of,
Yeah, at the end of your operations. So you would need to do that in process. I don't think.
no.
For normal operations, just when you're ready to.
Would you repeat that, end of operation, there'll be what?
at the conclusion of the sand excavating operation or sand and gravel operations, there would be no vertical faces higher than 10 feet. And any that are can be mitigated with earth slopes no greater than 100% slope or 45 degrees.
Yep.
Or in place of that, an engineered retaining wall.
Can we not say that?
That sounds expensive.
I don't have that much money.
I know. I figured I know which one you'd probably pick.
I think we'll email you to give us that information again.
Sure.
And with your renewal, you want me to add?
Well, just if there's any concern amongst, I feel like with that setback, it's probably adequate.
Are we talking about the 10-foot or the 20-foot?
Well, is the 10-foot with the slope
With the
or?
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's
I
at the
think-
end,
I
but the
think
20
that's
foot as,
fine, yeah.
20 foot as it's being
Yeah.
constructed.
I think the only concern would be is operations are going on, is there gonna be any, nuisance or other, do we need to revisit that in the
Right.
middle of
And
this
I think they
SUP?
stated 8 to 5, so as far as noise,
Yeah.
it wouldn't be, and then, did we say something about water truck or something as well? I
Yeah.
think you had mentioned that as well, so.
Yeah, I think with those condition, as long as, that's gonna be that's part of the plan, so we don't have to condition it on that, that's gonna be.
Yeah, that's part of the plan. So
Yeah.
when we are filing the ordinance, we would add those to it, yeah.
It's already labeled here, in other words, as
Yeah.
far as the
So,
timeframe.
so if
goes.
excavation was being done outside of those hours, or
Mm-hmm.
there was excessive dust, somebody could come back and say this
Yeah.
SUP is not being properly. Okay. And I don't think there needs to be a revisit requirement.
Okay.
Okay. Anybody wishing to speak? Again, now that we've heard some more data. Yes, sir.
I just want to clarify one thing and make sure I heard it right. Mr. Deppish said there would be no need for a revisit. What do you mean by that exactly?
We were discussing possibly if there would be a need to have you come back in a year or two to make sure that the use was not offending any of the people in the area.
And that won't be part of it, right?
That was my recommendation, is
Okay.
that we didn't
Okay,
need to put that condition on.
yeah. I mean,
Given your specific plan and how you've outlined you're gonna mitigate those issues.
right.
There's an opportunity for any of the neighboring landowners to come back if you're not doing that, I guess.
And you always, as the city always has the right to pull the permit if I'm not complying with
That's right, yeah.
what it says. So,
Thank you. Okay, so is there a motion to approve the specific use permit for the sand excavation with a 10-foot setback on the eastern boundary line with no vertical cliff faces more than 10 feet, and if so, they can be mitigated with a 45-degree earth slope, or otherwise known as 100% slope. Is there a motion to approve?
I'll move that.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carried.
Before you adjourn, we would like to call you up. Well, unfortunately for us, this is Matt Turner's last day. It's a big loss to the planning department, considering some of the good conditions you're already giving us, which I don't even understand about. But it's good. We really appreciate your time that you've been. I haven't worked with you for long, but from what I've heard, right from city manager till everybody else, you've done more than the city really expected, and so we really appreciate that.
Thank you.
We wish we had so much money to buy you a car as a son. Unfortunately, we don't have that much, so So I want to give you this certificate of appreciation, and then your name tag as well.
I get to keep it.
I want to say thank you very much for everything. If
thank
you
you.
will please join us, all of you join us. So we can.
Do we have to? Can I stand there? Yeah, I'll get back.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll get back.